If we did not have the help from Scaling Up and the Growth Institute, don't think we would have been successful. It's a really difficult thing to figure all of that out on your own when you're deep in the middle of something and you're in the struggle of the day-to-day of entrepreneurship. The results speak for themselves. I mean, we went from a 3 million organization to a 10 million a year annual revenue. We sold for 8 figures. We retired mom and dad. Mom lives in a beach home in Hawaii on the beach. Like, it's an amazing thing. Around the year 2015 or 2016, my wife and I were in Thailand. We were living there. We were serving in an orphanage. And then my wife was also a teacher at an international school. And we got a phone call from my mom. My dad and my mom were married when my mom was 16 and my dad was 18. They got pregnant with my older brother. And so they chose to get married and build a family together. And my dad had the pressure ever since then of trying to provide for his family and ended up having 5 brothers. So there's 6 of us total. So it's a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of people to help. And so my dad got into entrepreneurship and started this business. Well, fast forward to the year 2016, he gets diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and early onset dementia. And these health issues were affecting him and affecting his business. And so I got the call from my mom in Thailand, and my mom said, she basically was like, hey, can you guys do something to help? Because we don't have a plan for retirement. And I don't know if dad can keep running the business the way it is with his health issues. We're not sure how to deal with this. And so we, thought a lot about it. And I have a bachelor's in exercise and wellness and then a business background myself. I was trying to start a ton of businesses and failing like most entrepreneurs. And I had written a best-selling fitness book and was trying to launch a supplement company. And so I put all of that on hold and I went in to jump into my dad's business to help him get healthy and also to try and help run the company however I could. Once we got into the company, one of my brothers also joined me and he had an accounting degree luckily. And so we made a really good team. Once we got into the company, we realized like dad had done a lot of amazing things. He did an incredible job, but there was also a lot of opportunity for taking it from like a startup business to a really solid scale-up company that's actually running on systems and has clear roles and things like that. And so we jumped in. We're kind of in way over our heads. We're young, we don't know what we're doing, but our hearts are in the right place to try and help our parents. And I was actually praying one day thinking like, all right, how do I figure this out? How do I help my family? And I came across Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, and I got the book. I felt called towards the book, and I got the book and I started reading it. And I was like, this is the textbook for growing a business. This is the ultimate resource, and I read a lot. So I've read thousands of books, but I found this one and I could just tell. And I actually read my Scaling Up book so much that the pages were falling out of my book. And I took every single resource that Vern has in there. He quotes like, 40 other business books or something. And I got all of them. And I would go deeper on each topic as we were trying to implement what we were doing to scale our company. And during that journey, I was kind of looking into, well, what else is there in this scaling up world to help us implement this stuff? Because it's not easy to do, In the book, it says something like, or 3 years to understand and get this stuff going, another 3 years to master it or something like that. And so I knew it was going to be a long journey. And so we knew we needed help along the way. And that's when I came across the Growth Institute, and me and my brother started doing executive education with you guys. If we did not have the help from Scaling Up and the Growth Institute, I don't think we would have been successful. It's a really difficult thing to figure all of that out on your own when you're deep in the middle of something and you're in the struggle of the day-to-day of entrepreneurship. So if you can have a mentor like Vern and the Growth Institute team where they've actually been through this stuff, come in and help you while you're doing it, it's a no-brainer to me. And I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, we went from a 3 million organization to a 10 million a year annual revenue. We sold for 8 figures. We retired mom and dad. Mom lives in a beach home in Hawaii on the beach. Like, it's an amazing thing. So it's like, and while scaling, our team was happier than ever, better than ever. There's less drama. So we had high impact, less drama, just like your mission. And it was great for our family. And because of all this, we're now looking to the next phase of trying to build a portfolio of companies with the whole focus of doing good in the world And the only reason we believe that we can have multiple companies running on our portfolio is because of scaling up. So we're going to have everyone run on the scaling up systems and bring them onto a portfolio. So, I mean, I think it took us from literally nothing to hopefully now building a successful portfolio of a ton of businesses that are doing good in the world and having a massive impact. Yeah, when I joined, so my dad is an incredible startup entrepreneur. He's really good at taking a new idea, an innovative idea, and putting it into motion and getting it to generate initial revenue. So he had this business. It had been around for 17 years by the time I joined, and he had scaled it up to 3 million in annual revenue, which is an amazing accomplishment in and of itself. He hit 3 million and he had a team of about 13 people. So small team, good revenue. But the thing that was going on with the company was it was all dependent on him. So when he's stressed out and having health issues, it obviously really messes with the company's performance and how they service clients. And then the other thing is that he ran it like a startup where it was all around him. So they didn't have consistent meetings. They didn't have clear roles. He didn't believe in clear roles or titles or anything like that because he's an entrepreneur. You know, he wants freedom. He wants to buck the system and stuff. So I come into this company, high revenue, pretty disgruntled customers, really disgruntled employees because of the lack of clarity and the poor hiring and all that kind of stuff. And so we actually had to terminate 10 of the 13 core employees that he originally had, top grade the whole organization, fix all the hiring, install meeting rhythm, start to have quarterly plans and execution systems and KPI tracking and our annual targets and our 3-year goals and our BHAG and all this stuff. We didn't have any of that, right? So when we put all that in place and brought in the right team, we scaled the team up to 34 full-time employees. We had another 30-ish contractors or kind of like staff on demand employees. And that actually took us from 3 million to 10 million in annual revenue and caused all of these potential buyers, venture capitalists, PE firms and other buyers to want to purchase our company. And because of what we implemented from the Growth Institute, what we learned from you guys, we actually had a former executive from Apple come in and say, I don't know what you're doing. Your people are so happy. If I was younger, I would join your company. This feels like Apple in the early days. We even had a representative from Tony Robbins say, your company, the way this is run, it's in the top 5% of companies in the entire world. And we attribute that to what we learned from the Growth Institute and scaling up and being able to implement what you guys helped us do. So we really appreciate you. I think people have to remember that my dad, like our family came from nothing. You know, we were the kids that were on food stamps. My parents were married at 16 and 18, right? Like they were kicked out of their parents' house. My mom's parents had kicked her out for a while because she got pregnant. And they came from a very kind of religious family. And then my dad's parents, my dad's dad was an alcoholic and abusive and wasn't around, right? So they didn't have much and we didn't have much. So it's all new to us learning all of this stuff about how to deal with having a business and being a family in business and everything like that, which it's new to most families, right? It's usually their first time going through it. And so there is that piece, but I think knowing what I know now, I think what the wealthy do well is they train their kids early on if they're smart. They train their kids early on to be able to take over their business, be competent in business, you know, be very skilled from a young age, and they prep them for stuff. We didn't know any of that. My dad never intended for us to work with him. He always thought that kind of like his business was going to be his thing and we were going to go do our things, and there was no real anything there. So with that background, I think, yeah, it was best that I came in as the lowest paid person. And it was probably because my dad thought that I was going to kind of churn out eventually, like most other employees, that it was temporary. And I don't think he had that high of expectations for what we were going to do. But as we kept solving problems and fixing things, it was like natural to, you know, give us more responsibility and see if we could figure it out. And a lot of it wasn't actually by his choice. It was just the situation he was in, you know? So I think that, and a lot of people probably face this, but my dad wasn't necessarily wanting to give up control or, you know, he's struggling with his own demons kind of, you know, the sickness that he's facing and not wanting to admit that he has it to himself and other things like that. So like he's dealing with his own stuff and we're just trying to help and support and whatever. And it ended up coming together in a good way. I was reading all these different business books and I felt like a lot of times they just missed the mark. They were highly theoretical, not really applicable, unclear in how to apply them in the day-to-day life of an entrepreneur. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way, where it's like, you read the book, it sounds great, but how do I actually put this into my company? And scaling up is different. Scaling up is actually, here's all the information you need and here's exactly how to implement it. And especially if you get help with a master practitioner course where you have a scaling up coach like helping you along the way. One thing I love about your MBD program and your master business courses is that it's implementation focused, not education focused. So a lot of times when I recommend the Growth Institute, I talk to people, I'm like, look, we're all overwhelmed. We don't need more information, but we do need better implementation. And implementation is only as good as the knowledge that it's built upon. And so the Growth Institute understands this and they fix it by having implementation focused courses. And so when I would go in and be a part of these programs, there would actually be the coach who's reviewing like stuff that we're doing and we're actually like sharing back and forth how the actual implementation is going, and you learn by doing. And I think that's one of the biggest differences. So yeah, I found Scaling Up, it stood apart from all other books because of its clarity in both how it conveys information and the clear execution piece, and then the support that comes with the clear execution, which comes through the Growth Institute. The content was most helpful because probably from my training background and my designing programs for people to implement exercises and health kind of stuff, I feel like getting the right content was the biggest thing for me. And the Master Business courses videos go deeper into what each of the books cover, and you also get the content in a different way. So it's like when you read a book versus hear Vern explain what he meant, it's like kind of two different things. You're like, oh, that's what he was saying there, or oh, that's how they do that, So it gives you epiphanies from just listening to the content. And then when I would join the coaching calls, I think the coach piece was second for me because I like to ask them questions and get help. And all the coaches you had brought in were really talented and like really good people in any course that I was a part of. They had a ton of experience. And then the community for me was probably the third most important if I were to rank them. And the reason for that, I think, is just because I had my brothers and a good kind of community already. So we had a lot of support. We'd work with each other and I had incredible team members, but there were a lot of entrepreneurs I remember in the community where they were like, look, I feel really alone. I don't have anyone else to talk to. And this is kind of my lifeline of connection to other entrepreneurs and other people going through the same thing. So I think it probably depends on your personal needs and situation, but that's just the order for me. Most business courses, like it's common online. So online education boomed and everyone made a course and blah, blah, blah. And most of them, the problem with them is most of them are not actually experts. And so you get like these like young kids teaching you how to do all this stuff that they've actually never done, or even older people that have never done it. And so that's one thing that drives you crazy about other courses. The Growth Institute, the people are actually experts. The other thing that I liked about the coaches is with other courses, it's kind of like if you're building a house and you have an expert come in and say, okay, I'll charge you 10 grand and here's the blueprint for the home. You can have the blueprint for the home, but it doesn't make you capable of building the home. Like the actual building is a whole different skill, but they charge you 10 grand for the blueprint and then they blame you when you can't implement it. That's really frustrating, but the Growth Institute is different. The Growth Institute says, look, we're gonna hold your hand along the way. We're giving you the blueprint. We're gonna help you implement it. And I think that that's really, really powerful. So like when you first start top grading as an example, my hiring success, when I did the normal entrepreneur, trust my gut, ask the fluffy questions, whatever, my hiring success was like, I probably failed 80% of the time. When I switched to top grading, which I took the top grading master practitioner course and got help from the coach, and like we switched all our hiring practices, we went to hiring successfully about 80% of the time. So there's a complete reversal And it's not just because I read the top grading book, because I couldn't do it after the top grading book. It's because the coach helped hold my hand until I got actually good at it. And now I teach and help other people to kind of hire through the top grading methods. When I came into Infinity, again, my dad didn't have structures or really titles. And so people would kind of pick titles for themselves because they're trying to make sense of what role they played within the organization. And there was this guy who had kind of had the COO and HR manager title. And around the time I came back from Thailand, he quit because he felt too overwhelmed and he felt like he got another job and all this stuff. And so my dad's sick, this other main guy quit, and it's like, whoa, what do I do? You know, and the team was like, well, we need to hire people to fill in the gap to replace the people we're losing. And I was like, okay, well, how do you guys hire people? And there's not really structure there, or no one really knew, you know, because the guy who kind of was doing it was now gone, and my dad was sick. And so I was like, well, I guess I need to learn how to hire people. And so that's how I became like over HRs. Like I didn't have skills to do that necessarily, right? So then I started studying your guys' stuff, practicing interviewing. I was put in, my dad officially made me I was an HR manager at first. So I was a marketing assistant first. Then I was an HR assistant. Then that guy quit. And so then I was the only one in HR, but I didn't get the title manager right away. But I started having to solve all the people problems in the organization, you know. And it was the Growth Institute and Scaling Up that helped me do that, because I now had clarity where no one else did. So I said, okay, with hiring stuff, we're going to do top grading. With Scaling Up, we're going to take the people's portion of the book and we're going to start implementing all of this stuff. And we started doing the pace and the phase charts and, you know, organizing the organization. And we used job scorecards throughout the whole company. And that was one of the biggest game changers in the business, was getting clear on why we're hiring someone, what their history needs to be, what we actually want them to do, how we're going to measure their success. And so we put all of that into place, and that's how we went from mishiring to building a thriving organization. And even just that shift in clarity, which people a lot of times think that's a small thing, that's one of the biggest things, because your people are your biggest assets. And if they're unclear on what you want from them and how to do their job, they're not going to be successful. You know, so getting that clarity and bringing in the right people, that's one of the biggest things that took us from 3 to 10 million. And I've seen that over and over again for all kinds of companies. So it's a huge lever, but that's how the Growth Institute helped me. So I started doing that. And then after I had success with hiring for a little bit, the team started looking to me, because I was the one bringing people into the company and getting them trained and situated and giving them clarity and stuff. So they started looking to me for all that kind of stuff. So the natural next step was like, because my dad was coming into the office less and less because of his health stuff. And so I kind of moved into the COO position of starting to organize all of the departments according to Scaling Up and set the annual plans and things like that and targets for everybody. And so then once I started doing that and getting good at it, eventually I became COO. But that's how it worked. A bunch of the people in the company are older professionals in their area. I come in just a young kid out of college in his mid-20s, you know. And so and I'm the owner's son. So what everyone initially thinks is like nepotism. This guy's going to be spoiled. He's not going to know what he's doing. We don't trust him. He's only here because of, you know, his dad started the business or whatever. So I had to get through all of that, build trust with people, show them I actually cared about them, show them that I can and want to make their life better, and then sell them on the idea of scaling up as the solution to the chaos and stuff that they're experiencing every day. And the way that I did that was just speaking to what people wanted and helping them connect the dots. So it's like, well, if you feel reactive, overwhelmed, unclear in your day-to-day job, but you know that your goal is to increase your paycheck, increase your income, get promoted, move up to the next level, and you want to feel in control and proactive and have clarity on what you're doing, but people want to feel like they're in a role that they can master, that they have autonomy, and that they're trusted, right? So it's like, if I knew if I could get these things in place, that it would shift for everybody and they would trust me and it would work well. And so I just had those communications, spoke to them in a way of what matters to them, and kind of sold them on the idea, and then got it all installed. And it worked. It worked so well that so I told you there was 13 employees or 14 employees when we jumped in, and we had to terminate about 10 of them. Well, one of the 3 that stayed is now CEO of our company. So like, that's how well that worked, right? So like, for the right people, and she was one of them, she went from hired into this kind of chaotic, disorganized company that maybe didn't have a ton of a future to like, she's the leader, and this company is huge and it's doing really well. You either figure this stuff out or you die early, basically. There's something like that, right? And when I read that, I was deep in not figuring this stuff out. And the stress of running my business had already taken a huge toll on my dad's health, clearly. And it was taking a huge toll on my health. I was like 194 pounds. I'm a wellness guy, so lean muscle with abs, right? It's important to us. And by the time I'm like a couple years into the business, I had lost like 40 pounds of muscle, and it was from the stress of running a company. When we got scaling up in place and got the right middle management team in place and got everything running, it helped me get healthy again and do a lot better. And one of the biggest motivators for me, because I am a wellness person, was when I came into the company and seeing how a poorly structured company stresses out the team. A lot of entrepreneurs wouldn't want to say this, but kind of ruins their team's life in a lot of ways, because if you're not happy at work, you're not happy in a lot of your life, you know? If you're super stressed at work, it does end up leading to health problems outside of work. And I think people don't like to talk about it, but to me, it's our responsibility as business owners to actually care about that stuff, to build businesses where our team's life is better because they're a part of that business. Their health gets better because they're a part of our company. And the only way you can do that is by giving them clarity, making sure people aren't overwhelmed, allowing them to work on their passions, where they're best, on their strengths, you know, giving them growth opportunities, helping them earn enough. Like, all that stuff matters. And then having a culture where wellness and growth and vitality is part of the culture, which we did build into ours. And by doing that, it helps a ton of our team. And we got so much feedback from team members saying that their time with our company is what skyrocketed their career. It was the launch pad for them. So we always told our team, there's different business owners, you know, some are like, I'm afraid to train my team because if I train them, they might leave me. And we always learn, and I actually learned this in one of our master business courses, the alternative, well, what if you don't train them and they stay, you know? So what I always went and told my team is like, look, we will train you. We want to try and grow fast enough that we always have room for you to keep growing in the company. But if you're growing faster than us and you outpace us on an individual level, then I just hope that your next job is 10 times what you got here. And I will count that as a win, and I'm happy for you. So our value was win-win, and we tried to create that for everyone. And it worked extremely well, because sometimes we weren't growing fast enough for a team member to grow within the organization, and they would go get another job and they'd be forever grateful for us and their life changed. Other times we were growing fast enough and we could promote people, and our company was way better because of the longevity. So I think that you need to take an abundance mentality to it, but when you structure it correctly, people can be healthier, happier, and thriving. I mean, I don't think work is always easy, and there's periods of stress and overwhelm, but that's also where the value of having a quarterly plan comes in too, because you may have an overwhelming quarter, and then your next quarter is a shift on caring for your people and fixing stuff up, like how Scaling Up talks about, like process and people shifting, you know? So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Number one was setting the right direction for the team. So Scaling Up helped us with the OPS piece. Scaling Up helped us to get clear on our strategy, what we were going for, what is our 10x advantage, how do we analyze our customer base so we know the fastest way to scale and the right people to focus on, things like that. It's like setting the right BHAG, setting the right target, setting the right mission and vision. That was number one, was getting clear on that stuff. Once you know what you're working towards, number two was installing the right execution systems in place. It was extremely hard for us to get good at daily huddles, weekly team meetings, setting the right KPIs. Like, it's a challenging thing to get all that into place and to have like the thriving culture and the quarterly themes that people are engaged with and all that kind of stuff. So I think 1 is the right strategy and target, 2 is the right execution, and 3 was getting the right people to do all of that. And once we got clear on how to hire the right people, put them in the right place, have the right job scorecards and the right culture for it all, when we got all of those in place, that's what took us from 3 to 10. The Growth Institute is valuable against other education companies for a variety of reasons. Number 1 is the content from the Growth Institute is better because your team sources the top experts and then organizes their different components into something that makes sense. So I think one of the biggest problems in business is that each of the experts writes about their area of expertise, but there's not someone that brings it all together very well. And that's what Scaling Up in the Growth Institute does. So true experts with an organized, clear plan. That's one thing that's huge. The other thing that's huge about the Growth Institute is the right knowledge, but help with execution and implementation. I think a lot of times you get the right knowledge from a course or training, but you do not get the implementation and execution portion, and so it can't serve you. And then the other portion is that the Growth Institute, you've probably been a part of all kinds of courses where the courses are extremely long, they're drawn out, you do not have enough time to consume their stuff, and the courses are not actionable. And so it just ends up not being valuable for you. Like the people where they're a great business leader, but their course is just them resharing their speaking on stage or resharing them rambling. Like, it's not helpful, right? Where the Growth Institute is actually like, hey, we understand you're a very busy, overwhelmed entrepreneur or executive with limited time, and we're going to make the right size amount of information for you that can actually be executed in your life and with the time that you have. And I think that's a huge benefit to the Growth Institute. There were many times where my brother and I found ourselves completely overwhelmed with running our company and even behind on trying to execute what we were learning on the Growth Institute. But you guys did such a good job with the structure that we were still able to implement and keep up and stay on top of things in a way that helped us scale our company. So those are 3 main points, and I could probably give a million more. The stuff I like about the strategy is that you get clear on your targets and what you're working for and why and how your business is unique. They basically take all of the leading ideas on business strategy and combine it into a single piece of paper that if you can get clear on, you can just keep pointing towards that. And so we would literally bring up our OPSP, and I think there might be, 7 strata. There's like 2 pages, right? We would bring those up every single quarter and review them, because what you'll find is a lot of times in business, you get so deep in the weeds that you forget what you put on those pages and you start to go in another direction, and that pulls you back to your North Star. And so I think getting it down to a single piece of paper is actually really important. So we would use those every quarter. The people stuff we're literally using constantly. We ended up getting to the point where we had a whiteboard and we had our whole org chart on it, and we had everyone's roles mapped out, and we're kind of mapping like who's going to go where next and what do we need to hire for and all that kind of stuff. And it was literally based off of everything we learned in the people section. And then the execution stuff, I think one of the best things that we had there is like the examples in Scaling Up for how to structure your huddles and your weekly meetings. We just kind of copied those and they worked really well. And then we made it our own with how we tracked it with tech and whatever, but it was like, it's all there for you right in the book, and it really does work. And I think what I hear a lot from people is like, man, my weekly meetings suck and no one talks, or my daily huddles are super boring and it's hard to get into. It's like, we went through all of that as well. The only reason we got through it is because we had committed early on that we were going to do whatever it takes to trust Scaling Up and implement it before we made any tweaks to what you guys recommended there. Basically trusting you before we tweak it. I think a lot of people tweak it before they really test it. And I think that trusting you first was the right move, because it was super painful and it took a long time to get good. But once we got good, it just kind of cruised. The company was run by got-a-minute meetings and sort of like the whims of the executive team whenever they wanted to do anything. And then what that led to is a very reactive culture with the team that's really overwhelmed, because as entrepreneurs, as smart as we think we are, we're still human, and we still also are emotional, reactive, and sometimes short-sighted, and all the things that human beings do, right? So that's what the business was like prior. Once we installed Meeting Rhythm, we were like, this is going to be amazing. It'll solve all our problems. We were sold on the idea, and we started getting this meetings on the calendar, and then the team would show up and everyone was shy. They didn't know what to talk about. They felt uncomfortable. They didn't know what to report or how to report. They weren't sure if they liked that all of a sudden they had to see us every morning versus just rolling in late. They were used to like having random meetings where the founder just kind of talked about whatever he wanted. And now we're talking about having structure and agendas and reporting and people coming prepared. So it was a lot for people. And in the beginning, they weren't certain about it. But when we kept, I think what really got people to start adopting it was the fact that we start all meetings with big wins, if I think about it. And people really liked sharing their wins. So we would talk about, well, please share your wins, personal or professional. And what happened, we would lead by example. And what ended up happening is people would talk about, you know, what they did over the weekend and what they did for their kid and, you know, personal wins. And then that also got them into professional wins and, you know, what happened with this client and what they did great. And they started liking to have some recognition for their work and what they were doing and having their peers know. And then we would, you know, we'd get excited about these wins, and we'd also use these wins and ideas to improve and streamline processes and stuff. And I think that made people be like, whoa, I actually really like this. And so when we got the wins in place, the next thing that we really got dialed in was like the stucks and problem solving. KPIs was the hardest, but stucks and problem solving, we would let people share any concerns or stucks or things that are holding them up. And when they realized that they had support every single day and that they could get customer answers back to customers faster, that there was better communication, that this team member knew something they didn't realize they knew and that they could get support, they started to love that. And they're like, wow, this is really cool. And so we took that. So wins was our first win. Stucks was our second win. And then after that, we started to nail kind of weekly meetings. And the way we did it was by getting clear on our planning and priorities, because people realized that if we had a clear plan for the quarter, they liked it a lot better. Like work was less overwhelming and things were good. And they liked knowing what we actually wanted and what we were measuring and what we were pushing for. And they liked being able to report on that. So we got that into place. And then the last thing we got was actually KPIs. And KPIs was hard for us and kind of messy. And what we ended up doing is like, if we had clear KPIs for a role, then they would report it. But some roles we didn't even have clear KPIs for. We would give them a few things to report until we found out what made the most sense, because it was kind of a trial and error thing. But that's the process of implementing Meeting Rhythm, and that's kind of how it went. And eventually the team was looking forward to the quarterly meetings and the weekly meetings and the huddles, and we got good at it, and we'd open up huddles if we needed for a project. And then sometimes that project team would go away and we'd turn off the huddles, and it became flexible but really good. And the core department stuff was all consistent and everyone liked it. The first aha moment that I remember, because I think it was my first course, was top grading, was when they talk about the hiring by your gut, the woo-woo interview questions and all that kind of stuff, which I was doing, and the difference of measuring someone that past performance is the greatest predictor of future performance, and analyzing, have they have the right experiences and the right skills to do exactly what you need them, and the aha of like, you should get clear on exactly what you want before you even try and go out to hire, which is get your job scorecards written first and then go to the hiring and interviewing. Those were big ahas for us. Other ahas that we had in coaching was the idea that your communication rhythm is the pulse of your business, and the idea that like the more people you add, the more complexity it adds, and that you need to have like clarity, like pulsed communication through meetings, the right KPIs in each of the meetings. And then when you combine that with role clarity and people knowing exactly what they're doing, it creates like a really solid organization. That was really big for us. I think I mentioned some of the exponential organization ahas were the ideas of like testing ideas at the fringe with small teams that you trust. And if the idea is successful, bringing it into the core of the business. That was a huge aha for us because we did that a ton. We found our core team that could handle the change, they could handle failing, they could handle new ideas, and we would test things, and a lot of it would fail, but if it thrived, we'd bring it into the core and make it more a part of the core team who couldn't handle as much risk, ambiguity, entrepreneurial whiplash, all that kind of stuff, So that was another one. I would tell anyone, if you're doubting on taking the Scaling Up program at the Growth Institute, I would say just go for it. I know I'm biased because it made us over 8 figures and it was an amazing experience, but I think that the investing in the right education will change your life.